And we are live. Welcome, viewers. Welcome, listeners, to Religion Zero, number 51.
Hey! That's one more than 50.
Yeah, the half century, man. You know, it's going great. It's going great. And also a quick shout out and remembrance to the death of Harambe that took place this week. Yes. We just gotta, we gotta send our love out there. Yeah, there we go. It's been all downhill since then.
Yeah, pants at half mast, gentlemen. Show your respects.
F's in the chat. We'll be all right. So yeah, we're gonna have a very interesting discussion today. We'll see how long we go. But first of all, CONK, how has your week been? I mean, we had last week off. I had a couple errands to run, so I take full responsibility for that. But what's been going on with you, man?
Well, I got to see some internet people we know.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Masculine Geek was in Kansas City.
Excellent.
Yeah.
The whole crew?
2 out of 3.
2 out of 3. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Rob didn't come, which makes me very sad because I have a feeling I can trust Rob because you can trust people as far as you can throw them, and I feel like I could throw Rob pretty far. So I was like, oh man, my trusty rock wasn't there,
I'm gonna cut out that little clip right there and send it to him.
But TJ and Vince were in town from Masculine Geek. Shout out to them. We went, got lunch, went to the World War I Museum, and that's just something they wanted to do. And then we found out it's also, Memorial Day weekend, and we didn't put 2 and 2 together until we got there, and it was packed. But It was actually pretty sick. It was actually like half price too, which was awesome for like general admission tickets. And then after that, I took them to the barbecue place of Kansas City because I couldn't make them leave without eating real Kansas City food. So
nice,
good fun. Yeah,
that is the contention. The barbecue is supposed to be like the best in the world, right?
Oh yeah. Kansas City is the best. And like everything they make is good. The brisket, burn-ins, ribs, pulled pork, ham, like all of it is all top notch. So all of the restaurants fight over like very specific spices and dry rubs and sauces. And so everyone has their own special, unique brand and blend and sauces that they all home make. They all have 3 or 4 different versions. And like that's how they all compete with each other because all the food is already 10 out of 10. And so that's how they all try to one up each other, just based on their sauce and presentation and stuff. It's pretty interesting. But what I was telling them is like every place is going to taste completely different, but it's still always 10 out of 10 food.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so I took them to our place, the most Kansas City place that my family goes to. It's called Arthur Bryant's. And their whole wall while you're waiting in line is just every celebrity that's been there. They take pictures and get autographs and put up news articles about them. It's a very regular joint for Danny Glover, which is cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, awesome. He's got like 4 photos on there of all the times he come. Actually, the Clintons come a lot.
Oh my.
Yeah. And they may or may not be, steal a couple kids on the way out. Who knows? But the Clintons come a lot. There's also Steven Spielberg. He's got a couple in there. Some of the cast from Seinfeld. It's pretty cool. Yeah. And it's all the people who
awesome.
Where Arthur Bryant's is their place because everyone has their place in Kansas City. So
that's great. I mean, you got to put some pictures up, man. So, I mean, did you get pictures with Masculine Geek guys? And
no, I never took any pictures. I didn't even think of it. So,
oh, dad, that would have been pretty cool. That would have. I'll cut out that clip and I'll send it to the guys. I'm sure they'll appreciate the shout out.
Yeah, I think the Masculine Geek Twitter has some photos that they took of the day because they were there for like 2 or 3 days, and I just saw them for like 6 hours of one of them. So
cool. Oh, yeah. Do you know if you were in any of the pictures? I'll have to.
I think I'm in the corner of one of them. For lunch. We went to a place called Pawn and Pint, which is awesome. It's a bar hangout board game store, and what it is it has a door charge when you come in. And it's either $5 or $10 depending on how busy it is and stuff. And then they just literally have 1,000 board games lining all of the walls, and you just go pick one and play one with a group of friends. And it's got like 150 tables. They have a full bar, and they have a restaurant next door you can order from, and they bring it to you from next door. So it's pretty sick. So we had there for lunch. They had some drinks, and we didn't end up playing any games because I wanted to go to the museum, but that was pretty cool too. So it was a pretty
Sounds like a
interesting
good
weekend.
time.
Yeah, very, very
Yeah.
last second. So, yeah.
Awesome. Oh, I
How
mean,
about
yeah,
you, Brook? Yeah.
yeah, obviously no masculine geek. I believe they've canceled their planned trip out to Italy. So I was actually hoping to meet them up later this year. I think they said September, but I heard that's been postponed. So yeah, those are some good guys, man. As for me, what did I do? So last weekend, as you know, the pubs have recently reopened in Wales, and they've just allowed indoor. You can actually go inside now. You don't need to be outside and in the rain and the weather. So a couple of my friends were like, yeah, we haven't seen each other, let's get together. And yeah, the Sunday, as much as I had some other obligations, at the end of it, I managed to get into a pub with a bunch of friends, and we did a pub crawl, like for the first time in a very long time. Which I wasn't planning on. And yeah, I had a really good time. Met a lot of nice people in the area. Again, since I've even though I've been here for 10 months, I haven't been out because most of that has been in lockdown. So it was good. It was good to get out and stuff like that. And even last night, you could see my place is kind of in a mess here. I had some friends over last night, and yeah, things got pretty spicy and lots of drinking and stuff like that. Then we hit the pubs and stuff. So it's been good. It's been good to, after you've been cooped up for so long, you need that a little exuberance and a little, expression. So it was good to get out. But I, missed you guys, missed the show. I miss everybody's watching. So hopefully we should be back on a regular schedule from here on out.
I do have a quick question for you. Do they call it a pub crawl because by the end of it you're not able to walk?
Well, that's always been my understanding.
If you're walking, you did it wrong.
I mean, there's a great movie. What is it? I think it's called The End of the World, or I'll have to find it, but it's like based on the pub culture. And it's basically like, yeah, the world is ending, but these people are like, well, we have to go to like this pub for the last time. And it's all about their adventure for going, like passing the apocalypse, and all the shit's blowing up around them as they try to go to this pub. So I'll have to find that and let you know. But yes, that brings us to today's topic, my man. I mean, this is something that I think you were interested in as well. For me, it's been birthed out of a very quick story. Over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I have a blog. Anybody doesn't know, like, my religious blog is brookpotter.org. And I get comments on articles that I wrote all the way back in 2012 and elsewhere. And I think it's pretty safe to say, and CONK, I think you probably have a similar experience, and I'll ask you about it in a minute, that not a lot of Christians agree with my approach to scripture and my understanding of Christianity and these other things. And as a result of that, I get some very spicy comments from Christians critiquing and basically accusing me of being Satan and all these other great things. And I kind of realized, like, all of these arbiters, they're all popes, they're all popes over the religion. They could all determine what's true and what's not. And I thought it would be a very healthy discussion to have about these heresy hunters that feel the need to critique and point out every nook and cranny of what they don't agree with. So to you, CONK, have you had any experience of this?
Excuse me. Yeah, specifically people just trying to criticize and like whip you back into orthodoxy, right?
Yes, their orthodoxy. That's very different from actual orthodoxy.
Yeah. This is very interesting, and this is one of the reasons I want to talk about heresy too. And I think I sent you guys the link a while ago. That Sean McCraney, my main guy that I listen to, he helped a girl start an organization called Check My Church, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they had part 1, part 2, part 3. I think I sent you part 1. And what she does is she checks for, orthodox or heresy kind of thing, but he helps set it up, right? And what it is ever since that happened, all of these mainstream, like most of them are Calvinists, but not all of them, like YouTubers and TV shows like Apologia Studios. It's like a huge Christian podcast. All of them have just been taking turns, like making 1-hour specials about how evil Sean McCraney is and how horrible his teachings are.
Right.
And so in response to that, he's like, you know what? I'm inviting Check My Church here, and we're going to go through everything I believe just to show all of you are, horse shit, and you guys are just being stupid, right? And so she comes and they go through all of it. And like, she has some pretty hard hitting questions throughout all of it. Like, she talks about, Trinity. She talks about financial stuff as well, because that's a lot of stuff churches hide. So she gets into the nitty gritty of like, what do you actually believe? What do you teach? How are your finances? All of this stuff, trying to see if any of the churches are like actual heretical or a scam or, pulling one fast on people kind of thing. And so he went through all the interrogation, and she decided, he was not a heretical church kind of thing. So it's very interesting. And so they used to argue a lot with each other about it. And they used to come on and debate each other on different videos. He would invite him to his show. And when he would try to go on their show, they wouldn't let him kind of thing because he was too evil to be talked to. Yeah, it's very interesting how one-sided that conversation is, right? It's you're wrong, you're evil, don't talk to him, shun him from society. And Sean's like, hey man, I just want to chat. I think we're both brothers in Christ. I even did this big skibulous thing. And also she reached out to those people like at Apology Studios. And the other big one was James White, who's like hardcore, like apologist Calvinist guy online. And they both rejected to talk to her.
Really?
Check my church people. Yeah.
That's interesting. Just very quickly, Alex, no, you're not amazing. You're just average. This is my friend from Russia who I've done some traveling with. I sent her the link just to say she's live. I know she's probably got classes on today, but I'm glad that you stopped in for the most part. But yeah, back to the discussion. Yeah, what the video you sent me was very interesting. And I wished more churches would actually do that. So the church that I was involved in, for instance, when I had my shift, they came after me with all the same nonsense. He's the devil. If you see him walking down the street, cross the road. Don't break bread with it. Just nonsense, right?
If he's beaten on the Samaritan road, don't help him, right?
Yeah, exactly. Ironically, it was semi-friend of the show, Terrence, back then. He was the only one who actually did what was like biblical and said, I'm going to have a conversation with him. And Terrence and me had we sat down. I went to his house. We sat down. We had a chat. And like every 3 minutes is like, we may not agree on everything, but I want to understand. We may not agree on everything, but all right. We may not agree on everything. You don't need to like say it every 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. And this is what, I guess, especially with the Protestant, more so with the Protestant denominations, they don't have a lot of history. They don't have a lot of understanding of where the churches come from. And a lot of these topics are not settled, as we've discussed on this show. A lot of these things are, some of them are just a mystery, and the church hasn't really taken a position. And it's a lot more flexible than people kind of realize. But as you know, what we have now is like a generation of Gnosticism where people really believe that their doctrine is what saves them, right? Like their doctrine, they believe these 12 points or whatever. And if you don't agree with, 3 or like half of one or whatever, you are the other and you're going to hell. And that has nothing to do with Christianity whatsoever. So, I mean, have people come after you personally in any way?
Yes-ish. Sorry, my alarm went off. I don't know why it was set to 9:15 for no reason. I don't remember setting that. But anyway, I get really good at smiling and nodding when I don't want to talk to people. And I know it's not going to go well. So, and, I kind of had to build that out of my job because my job is very, female centered, so to speak, social work and all of those kinds of fields are very female dominated, and they usually don't like hearing unorthodox things. So I already had to have the superpower of smiling and nodding and not getting into it. Right. But I could definitely tell you there's a lot of people, if I did talk about it, would go there.
I'm sure.
But I've definitely had some churches where this is right. Anything else you say is wrong. And I've had some churches that were really open to talking about anything, and those were awesome. And ironically, the most open church I've ever been in was actually a Calvinist church. So
really,
they never changed their beliefs, but they're willing to talk about anything, like anything, so you could just bring up the most outlandish stuff. Like, Satan is made of bees and is cooler than Jesus. And they're like, okay, let's talk about that. What do you mean? It was pretty cool. So they didn't really shun anybody. They opened all discussion, all of that. And like they obviously wouldn't agree with you if you're going crazy. And they usually don't agree with you, even if you're just having slightly unorthodox things, but they're willing to hash it out. It was awesome. So that was one of the few good times that happened. Most of the time, they just tell you to shut up, or you know what I mean. So in other churches, this is right, you're wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get it. And the reason for why the Calvinists get it, and why probably, well, yeah, I guess the Orthodox are pretty flexible as well. The Catholics will have some discussion, but because they, the Calvinists believe in eternal salvation, right? Like you cannot, once saved, always saved. And this is the crux of the matter in Christianity, that if you are Gnostic and you believe that your beliefs somehow determine your, afterlife position, you're not going to ask the tough questions. But because the Calvinists believe, like, it's all a work of grace, God and election, once you're one of the elect, you can't really lose your salvation. You could become an atheist and still be a Christian in their view. That's when you're safe to have those conversations. And I think that's a very big thing for me. One of the, in the conferences that we used to do, and we would talk about, forgiveness, the concept of hell, healing, whatever it was. Once everybody was comfortable, that's when you'd start to hear like the really controversial questions come up. So I think a lot of it has to do with that. A lot of people still believe that, I can't ask these questions because, I'm going to, well, one, get kicked out of the church, or worse, go to hell. Right. So that probably explains a big reason why. Yeah. For sure. Is my connection giving some trouble?
I can hear and see you fine, but sometimes it's pixelated. But I mean, it's still coming through on my end. Okay. Chat, if you let us know if it's coming in okay on your side.
Yeah, let me know. So yeah, on that note, what are some of the most common objections or accusations you've heard? Maybe to yourself or even to the gentleman that you're listening to. What are they kind of saying is not orthodoxy or like puts them outside of the realm of Christianity?
Well, I would say especially with Sean and also me as well. It doesn't come up as much in my life. Most of my friends here, IRL, Stephen Green, we've had him on, and all of our buddies, we're all pretty open to discussion, right? We don't all agree on the same stuff, but one of the things that both Sean and I agree on is questioning the Trinity.
Spicy topic.
Yeah.
Modalism.
Yeah. And this is, I have a similar premise as Sean McCraney as well, is that like, I'm not even calling myself a modalist. I just think your Trinitarian foundation is sketchy, right? I think there's a lot of premises you're putting in there that might not necessarily be true, right? So, and he's like, well, if you want to call me a modalist, call me a modalist, but I don't call me a modalist. I don't care, right? I just think the Trinity is on shaky ground, right? So there's a lot of assumptions in there, right? Yeah.
I mean, that is a big one. It's not I don't think it's an essential doctrine, but it is very foundational to the early church. Again, I don't think, because the early Jews would not have necessarily had the revelation of the Trinity. So that's why I say it's not essential in that respect. I've never been very convinced with the modalist arguments. I've heard a lot of them. And it's, I mean, for me, just personally speaking, if it's God operating in different modes and there's only one God, love is incomplete in a sense. Like you can't really have love if there's nobody else to love. So if it's just a mono God, I mean, this is the same argument I do with Islam. It can't really be love, because love is an otherness, and that's kind of the foundation of the early church and stuff like that. But I don't care. I mean, believe what you want, right? It's like, if people aren't convinced with it, I don't think it's essential. So that's a cool one, though. We could have a talk on that sometime.
Yeah, it's interesting, because it always, like, anytime you're talking about the Trinity versus modalism versus other things. Also, thank you, Tom and Michael, for the super chats. That's awesome. God bless you guys as well. Salute.
Thank you, guys.
What was I saying? It's so every time you bring up the Trinity debate, it almost always, at least in my experience, starts rubbing against monotheism versus polytheism, right? someone's always
Mhm.
accusing someone else as being a polytheist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the biggest criticism.
Mhm.
We'll
And
see.
so, yeah, it's a very interesting topic, but I don't think it ever gets anywhere. So
Yeah.
I
It's a
think
tough one.
Trinitarians are going to stay Trinitarian, and I think non-Trinitarians probably won't be Trinitarians, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. I don't think it's a major issue. I mean, as you say, it's a mystery, and even the Trinitarians would admit that they can't really explain it. You know, three persons sharing a divine essence. You know, it's the foundation of like the Nicene Creed and you know, these different types of things. But nothing is off limits. Any
Mhm.
God that you can't question and any God that you can't like ask these types of things and get into, it's not worth your worship, to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, a big one for me, yeah, definitely the forgiveness of sins, like understanding that all sins have been forgiven, past tense. Because a lot of the church, and you'd probably know this,
Mhm.
is they are locked in this never-ending war against sin, and they're trying to fight a battle that's already been won, and they think it's on their shoulders to clean up their life and do all these other different types of things. So when I come across and say, no, you know, Jesus Christ is the Lamb that took away the sin of the world, right? He did it once for all. You don't have to clean up your life. That's his job. You know, he's the seed. He will grow in you and he will break all of this garbage off your life. The same faith that saved you is the same faith that's going to keep you and transform your life and stuff like that. They don't like that. They don't like that because at the end of the day, they realize in a lot of ways you don't really need to be in church then, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing unique that you're gonna get anymore if you realize Christ is in you and you're completely forgiven and accepted by the Father. So that's the one that and of course I've been accused of being light on sin and you know, I'm being licentious and I'm encouraging people to just do whatever they want. And of course, that's never been the message. No, I believe in the transformation of Christ in you. He's in you. He's gonna change your life, whether you like it or not. I believe he's actually that big. Trust the Christ in you, right? That's always been my position. Yeah, but I mean, you can't sell that in a church and expect people to keep coming back. So
exactly. And something interesting, and this is just something I've noticed in general, that I think the Calvinist church I went to is the exception, right? Sure. I think in general, they're usually the most staunch, right, on their positions. You know, the systematic stuff with Calvin and all of that, not to mention Tulip and all those things. But to me, that whole thing is its own weird contradiction in that they believe in predestination, which makes you think they would agree with you, but they would probably hate what you just said, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they have limited atonement. I'm a Calvinist with unlimited atonement. That's the difference.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. And and like it's so funny because you see them like trying to grind the hardest, which is ironic because like the biggest part of Tulip is that it's out of your control, right? So also, correct. If people don't know, Tulip is the 5 points of Calvinism that regard predestination. So
yeah.
I don't want to be throwing around slang and confusing people.
Yeah, I see Brian is saying I'm a bit pixelated. Yeah, I'm getting little flashes of my internet connection, so it might be a little bit shaky. I think that's my fault, guys. I do apologize. Nothing I can do about it now. But yeah, the other one that I get is I don't understand how it is that people can do like what happened. What's the name of the pastor you listen to again? I keep forgetting his name.
Sean McCraney.
Yeah. Sean McCraney. I don't know why people feel they have the right to go up to people and like judge their entire ministry. And many times judge it out of context as well, like pulling clips. So a very popular article that I have on my blog is talking about Miles Monroe, who was a preacher out in, I think, Bermuda or the Cayman Islands or something like that. Caribbean preacher. You know, he was kind of a prosperity gospel guy. I wasn't particularly a big fan of his, but he had a very unique perspective on evangelism where he would basically preach to people that, look, you know, all the good things of being a Christian before he would get to the part about how, you know, the death, burial, and resurrection could affect your life. So he wouldn't preach, he wouldn't come up to a complete stranger and be like, yeah, Jesus Christ died for you And they'll be like, well, yeah, that's great. What does that, what does that do? He'd be like, no, don't you know you're forgiven and blessed? And, you know, you have all these problems. You have a father, all because, you know, Christ crucified. Anyway, so it's a different perspective than a lot of people. People don't understand the context. And I defended the guy. I was like, look, he's not saying don't talk about Jesus. He's just saying, you know, if you're doing evangelism, you don't come and start with the blood and guts and gore, right? You come with a message of positivity that entices people, and then you bring them to the cross. And I get criticized on that all the time because you know, the guy just has a different way of evangelism. And I mean, it's like, really, you're going to pull a few things like anybody reads the comments, they all swear he's gone to hell over this, you know, this theology. They swear, you know, he's spawn of Satan and all this other kind of nonsense. Nobody knows if there is a hell, nobody knows who's in hell. So you are not that special to have that kind of inside knowledge, but people really feel vindicated to like go after these people. So I guess even with your guy, Sean, he must have been under attack tremendously.
Yeah.
I mean, what have you seen? Have you seen some of those attacks going on?
Yeah. I tried to watch some of the hit piece shows that were on Sean, and it was literally just taking like 5-second clips out of random shows that go back like 10 years or more, and just trying to edit them all together to make him look exactly like he's evil, you know? So it's kind of interesting how they do those. Wait, what was the question again? Sorry. My train of thought just completely changed. Yeah.
In terms of people feeling they can come and judge an entire ministry.
Oh yeah. Without
any context, without, you know, as you say, you pull a couple verses out from something you said 10 years ago. We've all said stupid shit that we probably shouldn't have said 10 years ago. Like, you're going to judge a ministry now. So have you seen that kind of hubris?
Yeah. Yeah. And pun intended, it's a very bad faith argument, right? It's
exactly.
Yeah, it's weird that they do all those things, but and I mean, I think we'll get into it eventually. On when that could be reasonable, right? Like, what is an actual heresy you should probably watch out for, kind of thing, or
correct.
There's also a lot of like non-Christian religions that say they're Christian and they have really weird beliefs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And we could probably get into that eventually. But yeah, it's very interesting. Like, it almost feels like cliques, like when you're in high school, right?
Yeah.
They're not part of our clique, right? So therefore, you know, screw them, right?
Correct.
And it's kind of weird. It's kind of that weird gang mentality. And I mean, it's just super obvious that one side is opening them to you know, Sean's side is opening them to come discuss, let's chat, let's hash it out, you know, I'll buy you some coffee and we'll talk it out, or we can do it on TV, or we can do it personally. And they just refuse every time. Right. James White did go on a show a couple of years ago. And he also had Matt Slick, who's another one of those Calvinist YouTuber guys. Yeah. And they both came in and they both just left angry and was just mostly accusatory. Right. They didn't really say much. Right. They just said why they think everything he says is wrong, and weren't really to like, you know, literally have a good faith argument of like, okay, let's figure it out. Right. They just wanted to prove why they don't like him. And then when he just said, well, I don't know about that, then they're like, screw you. And then they would. So, yeah, it's just weird how that comes. It's like, it's so staunch headed that there's no way it can come from a spiritual place. Right. At least in my opinion. So it's definitely got to be something out there, which is what reminds me of high school cliques. Like usually the jocks and nerds, they don't have reasons to hate each other, right? They just do for no reason. Like, they're not actively trying to, you know, they don't have like opposing diametric politics or religion theologies. It's literally just people who just don't like each other for no reason, right? You just decided, I don't want to be a part of that team, you know? And it kind of feels like that. It almost feels that petty, you know? It's dumb.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I mean, I guess in some ways the church is, especially in the US, I suppose, it's become a business in a lot of ways. So these people are your competitors in a lot of ways. Yeah. And they people are going out of their way to try and make that distinction and, you know, demonize the other guy. It's no different than politics, really, you know, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Stirring the pot gets you some views, you know.
Correct.
Yeah, and
the other
part. Yeah.
It goes back to what you said in the beginning about, not all, when you go to the Calvinist church, they are open to having the discussions and stuff like that because they believe they're secure in their salvation or whatever. A lot of people don't have that security. They're running through hoops, they're trying to please God and they're trying to do all this stuff and keep busy. And they feel that part of that responsibility is to go and, point out errors.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, nobody has this completely figured out. Like no branch of the church has this entirely right, which is fine, right? We've been fighting over this shit for like 2,000 years. And there's some things we just don't know and we will never know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all subject to interpretation. So I think you would join me in saying, I think we both have convictions about what we believe, but at the end of the day, we could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if
and you have to learn to be okay with that, realize you're a dumb human and humans don't know that much.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you're asking to know the mind of an infinite being and, translated into human terms. There's a lot we didn't get, right? I mean, as even the Bible says it, if we wrote down everything that Jesus did, the world couldn't contain all of the literature. There's so much to it that, of course so that's why we kind of focus on the essentials, the basics or the orthodoxy. And even in Orthodox Christianity, they would never say that somebody is a heretic. That's a very strong word. And we'll get into that. They of course the Orthodox Church considers themselves to be Orthodox, and they'd say somebody like the Catholics or the Protestants or the Calvinists, they would just say they're heterodox, meaning they don't necessarily share the same view, but they're not casting them out into the lake of fire, right? They're not saying they're not Christian or anything like that. They're just saying no, their beliefs are different, and that's kind of, and I appreciate that. If the Orthodox Church didn't have that attitude, I probably wouldn't stick around as long as I did. But yeah, maybe we could touch on what is a heresy and maybe a couple heresies that are actual heresies. Yeah. And whether we should even care.
Yeah. Is there ever a good time to be a heresy hunter? Right.
Yes, indeed. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think a heresy really is? And when do you think we really need to kind of perk up and pay attention?
Yeah. So before I was just Googling around for the word, just talk about the definition of heresy. And there's like, everyone has a different answer.
Yeah, it's true. We can't even agree on that.
Yeah. Can't even agree on the definition. A lot of them, especially in today's realm of like relative extremes, a lot of the, I would say almost on the Protestant side, heresy is like somebody that believes something evil or like, so opposed to what's true, right? They use that kind of lingo. But there's other ones that are more trying to be more analytical, and it just says different from orthodoxy, right?
Right.
And so some people just have heresy of oh, that's different, and then other people have heresy who are like, oh, that's bad, right?
Right.
And bad versus different is a very big thing, right?
That's a huge gap.
Yeah. And so depending on where you're getting your sources and where your theological history of wherever you choose to be associated with, is going to have very different meanings on the word heresy, right? But I think, at least from what I've seen from like older versions of heresy, it's that more different, not that necessarily evil thing that we more ascribe to it today. So, and that's weird because if you're going off of just the different, both of us would be pretty heretical, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
It would be, I think we would fit the different description in multiple categories, right?
Correct.
We actually I was talking about this with Masculine Geek when we were at dinner, was talking about like how hard it is in today's day and age, especially in Western religion, to try to question monogamy.
Yeah.
And like even bringing that up makes people hate you, right?
Yeah. That's a fair point.
Yeah. And just from the religious context, it's so ingrained in your life. And I was relating it to, and we might have talked about this in one of the other episodes, talking about Foucault. He's one of the, when we're talking about the postmodernism stuff. This is one of the few points I think he does say correctly. One of the very few points I think he says correctly is he talks about different forms of power, because he talks a lot about, knowledge is dumb. It's all about power.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's kind of where you go down that weird critical rabbit hole. But when he talks about power, he talks about it in different ways. Instead of, it's not always oppression versus victim and all of those kind of things, because that's the more obvious version of power. There's a president or a boss telling you what to do, right? But he said there's other forms of power where you agree with it innately without questioning it. And the most common example is, this morning you could have picked wearing a red shirt or a blue shirt, but it never crossed your mind to even think of, why do I have to wear a shirt? Right? You know what I mean?
Fair enough. Yeah.
But in reality, you could just walk outside with no shirt, right? But it didn't even cross your mind because it's already ingrained in you that you have to wear a shirt, as a subtext of even asking what color shirt I want to wear, right?
Yeah.
And it's those kind of cultural norms and associations that everyone agrees with, which actually has significantly more magnitude of power than somebody yelling at you and telling you what to do, and then you have to either do it or rebel, right? Because at least the choice is being presented. But there's so many things ingrained in society that are a strong form of like cultural influence that you don't even think about because you already accepted it at the onset, right? Not even thinking about what you're actually being asked to do, right? And so the t-shirt is obviously the superficial example, but it's one of those things I think is you could use as towards Christianity and monogamy, right? If you bring up the idea of polygamy or anything like that, it's instantly like, what? No, that's stupid. Why would you even talk about that? Right? It's already assumed you have to be monogamous if you're religious, right? At least in a Western religion, they don't even want to talk about the other thing because it's such an ingrained, powerful cultural norm that, oh, you're supposed to get married and have 2.5 kids and a white picket fence, right?
Yeah.
And so, trying to remember where we're going with this, but
well, yeah, heresies in the church. And
and
what would be an actual heresy?
Yeah, and so talking about monogamy, it's one of those things where it's like even bringing it up, everybody thinks you're a heretic, right? It's pure heresy to even bring it up, but it's funny because like, are they even reading their Bible? Like, out of all of the biblical, father historical figures, how many of them had one wife? Like
Correct.
one of them, Peter is the only one we know for sure had one wife.
Possibly, yeah. He may have remarried. We don't know, but yeah.
Yeah. But that's the only one that we have any kind of evidence that was monogamous, right?
Yeah. Well, Paul was a widower, so we had at least one. So yeah, we don't know.
Yeah. So when these people are talking about, 5 wives, 10 wives, 300 wives, God saying, if you wanted more wives, you could have just asked me. Like, you think it would be a lot easier discussion to talk about in the Bible? Like, is it always monogamy, right?
You would think so.
But yeah, they're so blinded, and it's that such cultural power influence. Foucault talks about that. Like, you can't even bring up polygamy, right? It's already instant heresy, instant. You're wrong, right? They don't even see the in between the lines of, instead of saying, who am I going to marry for the rest of my life? It's like, why is that always singular, right?
Yeah, because even the ancient Jews, I think they outlawed polygamy probably the 100 or 200 AD. But there was a reason. There was a reason why the Jews, and I mean, it's their book, right? They understood the thing. They understood that if a wealthy person took all of the women and it left a large section of the male population without potential wives, there was potential for empire to collapse, basically. So the Jews, by edict, the rabbinical council basically said, we have to do away with this for the betterment of society. And Christianity kind of adopted that as well. Remember, I mean, when Rome became in power, having multiple wives and concubines and all that kind of stuff was, kind of very Greek and Roman history. And they understood that as well. So there's a lot of politics that came into the monogamy discussion. And as you say, yeah, it's lasted to this day. It's a pretty interesting discussion.
Yeah, that actually kind of reminds me of Brave New World.
What's Brave New World is?
It's one of those post-apocalyptic video. It's kind of like,
it's a video game.
Right. No. It's an old book, right?
Okay.
It's like 1984, where it's like an alternate apocalyptic future of like how weird and corrupt society can get. And they did the same thing that you're talking about, the same reasoning of the Jewish thing, but they did the opposite, that everyone had to sleep with everyone.
Right.
and they're trying to breed out selfishness, because you all having monogamy was selfishness, or having people you possess or you claim separate from others is selfishness.
Interesting.
But they did it for the same reason, and it was to pacify everyone.
Right.
And just likewise, giving the people who can't compete in the sexual marketplace, using RP terms, enforcing monogamy, to pacify people so those people don't act out. Likewise, Brave New World did the same thing, did the opposite thing, but for the same reason. They said everyone has to sleep with everyone, and you can't deprive people of your body because that's selfish.
Interesting. Oh, I have to check that out.
So people wouldn't overthrow the government, and they would all be pacified. Yeah, it's very interesting.
That is interesting. I'll have to check that out. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what was I gonna say? Right. In terms of, my approach to the heresy thing, I agree. You can be heterodox, which is you have a difference of belief, in terms of in the realm of Christianity, and there are a lot of topics that are kind of broad, and you can have multiple views and stuff like that. Versus what would be considered orthodoxy, I think there are some essential tenets to call yourself a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
That you have to believe certain things to be a Christian?
To be considered a Christian. Would you say that?
I would say yes, but it's a very small list.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. It's a very small list.
Yeah, it's a lot smaller than people want to say it is, right? And I think I brought this up multiple times, but my guide is the thief on the cross. Right. He literally did the bare minimum and was promised salvation by Jesus, right?
Correct.
Which was, he talked to him, he said sorry, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
he didn't get baptized, he didn't speak in tongues, he didn't, take communion. He didn't do any of that crap, right? So it was the bare bones essential stuff.
He didn't even say sorry. He just said he deserved what he was getting. It's kind of like, he just admitted he was guilty, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I would second that notion that the only stipulation is to believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Mm-hmm. And now there's a lot that's attached to that throughout the centuries, and I say that we'll get into. The early Jews didn't necessarily have a Trinitarian understanding, which is why I don't think it's an essential doctrine. So you can believe Jesus is the Son of God in whatever fashion you do, and that's kind of it. Like that is, you're technically, that is your foundational Christian belief. There are other aspects to it in terms of teaching, and the early church, of course, pointed out, the distinction between law and grace. So, the first Jerusalem council was, do we apply the law of Moses to the Gentiles? And we see it throughout the scriptures that Paul had very strong words for the Judaizers, who were the ones trying to put the law back onto the Gentiles, and he called them anathema and all these other types of things. So there are aspects to the faith. Once you're kind of in the faith, it doesn't mix well with certain other beliefs. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say for sure. And a lot of it, honestly, it comes down to faith versus works, right? Virtually every other religion requires works, right?
Correct.
And even certain sects of Christianity, whether you want to call it or not, also require works for salvation. So either directly or in between the lines. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is the great hypocrisy of the church. I don't know if you ever seen what's this guy, Andrew Womack, talk about the great hypocrisy of the church.
I've heard that name, but I don't think I know his stuff.
Yeah. Well, he's a grace preacher. He's close. He's not all the way, but he talks about this. He says, look, a drunk comes into the church, and I probably shared this story before. A drunk comes into the church for the first time as an unbeliever drunk. And everybody's like, oh, it's going to be okay. God loves you no matter what. It's all by his grace and all this good stuff. And, just give your life to Jesus, and, everything's going to be fine. And okay, so fine. He does his prayer or whatever they do and stuff. And they got all the grace in the world as long as you're an unbeliever. Mm-hmm. But let that same drunk come back the next day as a Christian drunk.
Get the whip. Yeah.
Yeah. Suddenly it's like, you can't be doing that. Have you been paying your tithes? You got to clean up your life. You got to get right with God, right? So he tells the story like that. And that is the great hypocrisy of the church. Mm-hmm. So we preach a message. It's by grace and grace alone. You enjoy your salvation by faith in Christ. And that's how you get to experience all the benefits of this life and stuff like that. But because we don't really believe it's by faith alone, we don't really believe that he's done the work, and we're just kind of partaking in it, we think we have to add to it. And that's where all the works stuff comes in. And yeah, that was the battle in the early church. We're still fighting it today, right? So you would agree with that, but even with the works, would you say that if a person believes on Christ and still believes in works, because this would kind of sum up the Catholics, they're still in?
Yeah, I would say for the most part. It's hard to tell. See, that's the tricky part is
correct.
How would I put it? It's like believing we believe there's an objective truth, right?
Yes.
Jesus died for sins, Son of God, all of that. That's an objective thing. But how you live it out immediately after that is subjective, right?
Correct.
And so it's learning that balancing act of it, like not giving into the small stuff, right?
Yeah.
Of like trying to get browbeat by other people's small stuff. And learning yourself not to browbeat others on the small stuff. And so it's tricky. And so it's, with the whole thing of works, one of the big parts of the New Testament is works or the fruit after the fact, right?
Correct.
And people try to use that as a measuring stick of other people trying to judge other people's spirituality, right?
Correct.
But it's ironic because that in itself is not a good fruit.
Correct.
So yeah, judging other people's fruits in itself is not a good fruit, it's like this weird paradox, right? It's
completely agree. It's the whole, don't worry about pulling the speck out of your brother's eye when you got the beam in yours kind of thing. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I've got a friend right now, bless him. He came to a conference that we did back in 2012 in Wichita, Kansas. And he loved the message, but he didn't really understand it. If I'm just being frank, he got bits of it and he liked the forgiveness and stuff like that, but he didn't stay there. He obviously went back into some kind of works mentality. Anyway, we kept in touch. I think we were friends on Facebook, and he has now come back and he's trying to preach like now he's got it. He's trying to preach it to me like I haven't been preaching that for the last 8 years, right? He didn't get it from me. I don't know where he's got it from. Thank God he's kind of woken up to it. But he now thinks that I need it. And I'm kind of like, bro, I preach this every Sunday kind of thing. Like, you're preaching to the choir here.
Oh, yeah.
But, he has that. It's a bit of hubris. It's like he thinks he's seen something in me, even though I haven't actually seen him in years. And he has this need to try and like fix me for some reason. And I think there's a way to do that, and then there are ways not to do that. And I guess we can touch on that very quickly. But in terms of, let me just touch on, okay, so in the early church, there were a number of heresies that the councils tried to deal with. Judaizers was the first. Gnosticism was another one. Nestonianism. That was another. There were about 7 or 8 of these different things. And the difference would be when it comes to the New Testament, we have the First Council of Jerusalem where they decided they didn't want to put the law on the Gentiles. And there's a very important phrase that was said in that, which was, it seemed good to us, the apostles, and the Holy Spirit that we should not burden the Gentiles. Cool. Since then, we've had more councils, and we could have councils today. Vatican III was, I think, in 1968 or whatever it was. So we still have councils to this day. But the one thing we cannot say, thank you, Nestorianism, that was it. The one thing we can't say is whether the decisions made in these councils are good with the Holy Spirit. There's no way to know if that aspect of sealing a decision by the council is kind of like this is the thing. And that's where a lot of the problems kind of come in, because the council, as best as they could try and hash things out, we don't know if they got it right. And that makes me Pope over the church, right? That's that basically makes me Pope and basically saying, look, they did the best they can. We don't actually know if they're right. I would side with most things that the early churches kind of come up with, because, you know, I'm going to hope that they kind of hashed it out. But even with that, there's definitely things I struggle with, like the perpetual virginity of Mary. Martin Luther, father of the Reformation, believed in the perpetual virginity of,
even though Jesus had brothers and sisters. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's debates on that, whether the word means cousin. You've heard all the I struggle with that.
Yeah.
Right. I understand that as the early church teaching, and you couldn't beat that out of Martin Luther and many of the reformers and the early church. I struggle with that, and it's because I think it's Gnostic thinking. I think, you know, the idea of this kind of separation from sexual.
I always think, what's the point, right?
Yeah,
there's nothing in the major theology that changes if she had sex or didn't have sex after Jesus, right?
Correct.
Nothing. I mean, you're just saying it just to say it, right?
It's, well, I mean, we don't know, honestly. We honestly don't know what the position was. And I mean, I've heard all sorts of arguments, but for me, because I understand that, and you would understand this, marriage in the biblical sense entails sexual union. I think there are too many pragmatic problems with the idea of her perpetual virginity. Right. And it's Gnostic. It's the idea that sex somehow diminishes your holiness. So that's kind of my position. But I fully accept that I am heterodox in that perspective. Like the Orthodox Church and many other churches, that perpetual virginity of Mary, that is a line you don't cross. I can't swallow that pill. So technically I would be heretical. Yeah. Not in the Protestant camp, but like in the Orthodox camp. So I mean, have you encountered any teachings like that you know, it's kind of rubbed up against, like, okay, so maybe this is the tradition that the church is holding and you just can't quite swallow it?
Yeah. I mean, we just talked about it briefly with like the Trinity and monogamy and all of that kind of stuff. The other one I would say that's also pretty big, and we would both definitely be heretical, is how much most modern Christians care about revelation.
Wait, the book or actual revelation? What do you mean?
I mean, technically both, but yeah, I was thinking like, you know, end times doctrine and dogma.
Right. Yes.
It's such a huge deal. And everybody wants to talk about it and what all the symbols in Revelation mean and what's coming pre-trib or post-trib, millennials and all this stuff. And I'm like, why does this matter? Like, I can't get myself to care about this. I just can't get myself to care about Revelation or end times or Jesus' second coming. I just don't care. And I don't think I will ever care, you know? But it's so ingrained in American culture to always be talking about end times and Jesus is coming back, right?
Yeah. You guys are very big on like the rapture theology and, you know, Mark of the Beast and all this other kind of stuff. So that would drive me. And again, it doesn't matter. It's absolutely it's a fruitless. It's a fruitless endeavor to like invest your time trying to understand the Book of Revelation. In fact, the Orthodox Church has no liturgy with the Book of Revelation. They excluded it for a good while, for like a couple centuries, and then added it back, which is why there's no liturgy surrounded around the Book of Revelation. It didn't matter as far as, you know, they were concerned. So I would share your view in that respect. End times theology, it's fun. Nobody knows. There's multiple interpretations. Banking on that kind of stuff,
and none of them matter today.
But you see, that's the problem. If you're a futurist and you believe the rapture is going to happen at any second, it's going to matter to you, right? That's you're on the edge.
But it said even Jesus doesn't know when it's going to happen. So like, how are you going to figure it out?
Exactly. So
I'm just going to take that verse at its word instead of trying to beat around the bush, you know?
I mean, he gives signs, you know, these are the signs of my coming. So that, you know, they're trying to interpret every camel fart in the Middle East as, you know, a sign. It's kind of fruitless. So, I mean, would you say that there's a belief in Christianity? Well, okay, let me rephrase that. Is there a belief that you could hold that would put you outside of Christianity then? The example, let me just finish the point. If I were to say a Muslim person believes that Jesus is the son of God or believes he's a prophet of God. So they believe in Jesus and they believe in all that, but they don't believe he's God or any kind of representation. Where are they?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's what I would go to, is like the one big thing that would make me question everything is that divinity humanity balance of Jesus, right?
Right.
I think that's where people get into the biggest shit piles, right? Or getting stuck in the mud. And it's funny, I literally just talked to a Jehovah's Witness earlier, and they were talking, they believe Jesus was created, right?
Yeah, he's the first created being.
Yeah. And Mormons believe he was the first son, which was God literally had sex with his space wife, and the firstborns were Satan and Jesus, right?
Yes. Yeah. They were brothers. Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, I think that's too far-fetched, right? That is where I kind of draw the line, is the divinity and humanity balance of Jesus. Is if you have one or the other off, then it definitely skews the entire point of the religion, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
I think so. Nestorianism, actually, the one that Tom pointed out, was to address that exact same issue about Jesus being human and divine. So again, something I don't like, but both the Orthodox and the Catholics do it, is that, Mary is the mother of God, right? And I don't like the phrase,
kind of,
because
not really.
It's kind of not really. But the reason they did it, and the reason it became like part of the ethos of the Orthodox and the Catholic Church, was to address the divinity of Christ. Like, they did not want to leave wiggle room for people to say he was just a man or he was just a prophet. So they directed to say that no, Mary was the mother of God. I don't like that phrase, right? Because truly God is eternal. He doesn't have a mom.
Yeah.
So I would agree with you and that was the crux of the matter, is those that believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and that means divine, not just offspring. That was the line in the sand. That was what separated the sheep from the goats, as they say, right?
Yeah, it's fun. I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. But kind of reminds me a lot of government regulations of Backstreet Boys, right? Reunion tour. They said stuff they didn't mean in order to, because they're scared of how people would react to it, right?
Correct.
And it's that overcorrection because you're scared of what might happen, kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of what that sounds like when you have to call Mary Mother of God.
That's exactly what they did.
Yeah,
exactly. So they took it in that direction. I understand it. I don't particularly like it, but okay, I understand what you're trying to do. So yeah, I would agree with that. So yeah, I mean, what else did you want to hit on in terms of heresy? I mean, what would you say is a heresy that we're facing today?
The different or the bad?
No, the bad. Let's do the bad. The different. Oh God, fuck! Everybody disagrees on everything.
Yeah. I don't know. This might even be something we disagree on, but it's the new agey half of, like, God is everything and everywhere, and we're all little gods, and we're all, God is everything. God is that tree. God is that acorn. God is the poop I just flushed.
Right.
To me, that is sketchy, right? And I think that one I have a hard time with, and I think probably doesn't do any good, right? It's better to like, if you're worshiping God, but you also say God is everything, then are you worshiping the poop you just flushed, right? Is that also God? To me, that logic doesn't flow well, and I think it kind of hinders the message more than it helps, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and I think this is something we might have disagreed before, but
I mean, I would disagree, because that's a very orthodox position, that Christ is the center of creation. He holds all things together. So it's not a lie to say that God is the poop that you flush. He gives it existence. So he all of creation is held together by him. But I understand it, because the new age has kind of co-opted it, and they've done it. It's not entirely wrong, but they've taken it in a direction that's not exactly healthy. But it is an orthodox position. Like, the Orthodox Church would disagree with that and be like, yeah, God is everything. He is all all things are held together by Christ, by the power of his word. So he literally holds us together. doesn't mean you worship the poop, right? It just means he is in everything and stuff like that. And that's why for a lot of people say, oh, well, people are bowing down and worshiping idols and other things. And they're kind of like, well, yes and no. They're worshiping the idol, but in truth, even the little icon that they carve, it is God. It is, so that it gets fuzzy and stuff. It depends on how you approach it. But the idea that God is everything and everywhere and all in all, it's very orthodox.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think some people take it too far. Well, like, cause I'm thinking more of the aspect of like the hippie or the Joe Rogan aspect where like the universe is God, right? So when you're praying, you're just praying to the universe. And, to me, that's very different because we don't really see the universe as like a Father, Son, Holy Spirit thing, right? We see it as like stars and black holes and shit.
No, I get it.
Praying to the universe as God, like, because that form, that hippie or that Joe Rogan-y aspect, those people that go from there, they're not using it as like the Judeo-Christian basis of God is the universe. They're just saying they're just kind of just using it as a hyperbole term. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got. I mean, as you say, they're not entirely wrong, but they're not in. The concept is right, but they're using it wrong. It's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah,
yeah. So I would get that. I think that's a big one. I mean, for me, the big heresy we're still facing today is Gnosticism, the idea that we're saved by our doctrine, the separation of like holy and secular. Dualism and this type of thinking, all of that I think is very relevant that we're still facing today. And even in the discussion we had here, because people believe that they'll never admit it, but they believe they're saved by their doctrine. That's why we can't have conversations about difficult topics, because nobody wants to be wrong because they think if they get it wrong, they're going to hell. Right. So that's the big one for me. And again, that's why I struggle with the virginity of Mary, because sex is worship to God. It's like doing your intimate act with your wife and stuff is actually you're doing, that's part of your worship, man.
Yeah. If sex bad, why feel good?
Yeah. Exactly. All right. So I'm going to throw the link out into the chat and we'll see if anybody wants to join in. Anything else you wanted to hit on before we let anybody in?
Should we name names of people we think are outside of
I don't know
Christian orthodoxy? Even just sects or denominations or organizations or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, take a crack.
Like who would you openly say is like heretical? Like I think one we could agree on is like Mormonism, right?
I would say the Mormons are heretical. The Jehovah's Witnesses are heretical. And you see that it's a tough one. Who else? I don't know that many other big denominations. That would be the issue.
So there's Mormon, and then there's also Reformed Mormon, RLDS instead of LDS.
I didn't even know that.
They used to believe in both the Bible and Book of Mormon, and now they believe in neither.
Spicy. Oh, the Brahmanites are definitely heretical. Who else? I don't know anything about the Mennonites. I think those are the big. Any sect that kind of reduces Christ to just a man, or like the Jehovah's Witnesses, a created being like an angel, and their view has gone back and forth for 100 years. So he was once the archangel Michael, and then he was the first creation, and they can't make up their minds. I think those are the big. What about you? Who would you say is kind of outside the sphere?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with the ones you pointed out. It sounds like it doesn't need to be said, but it does. But Scientology. Because a big part of Scientology is saying you can be a Christian and Scientology. Yeah, but they say you can be a Christian and Scientologist at the same time, and they don't contradict. But they do.
I didn't know that. Okay, but I guess it is technically a religion, isn't it? Yeah, I suppose. I would agree with that. That's some messed up stuff.
Yeah, and then the obvious ones like Islam is a pretty different religion.
Yeah,
and then there's Baha'i, which is the Mormonism of Islam.
Correct. Yeah. I know a couple of people. And then there's Sai. Sai is an interesting one. From Sai Baba out of India. Basically, he's everything. right? He's the Christian to the Christian, the Muslim to the Muslim, the Buddhist to the Buddhist, and basically they take it all. It's like, oh, even though it's just kind of technically impossible, these religions fundamentally have very disagreements, irreconcilable differences. So frivolously they can be the same, but at the root of it, no, they can't all be the same. So I knew Sai was a pretty big movement back in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, Sai Baba has the same day as my birthday, so every time it's my birthday, there'll be big pictures of Sai Baba and stuff like that.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, I think those are the big. I mean, Hinduism. The problem with Hinduism is they can get it right and wrong at the same time, right? So Jesus is just, he's just another god. Yeah. And he's like everything the Christians believe. Yeah, they believe that too. But they got all these other gods, right?
Yeah. So, kind of reminds me of the unknown God story in Acts.
Spot on. That's exactly how the Hindus approach Christianity and pretty much everything else.
It kind of reminds me of that meme where it showed like a little Christian girl praying to God to win the spelling bee, and then it shows like a Hindu girl like praying before bed, asking Ganesh like to help her with the spelling bee, and then it shows those two fists fighting in heaven,
fighting it out
on who's gonna win the spelling bee.
That's pretty funny. That's
That's one of my favorite memes. Too good.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think that the Christianity is a broad church in the sense that, and I think we both agree, the work of Christ has affected all of creation. It's affected everyone. Not everybody's partaking in it because not everybody knows it and not everybody believes it. That's what distinguishes you as a Christian enjoying the Christian life. But it doesn't mean that what Christ has done has not affected everyone. So people could still be in the dark and still stumble upon truth. So a story for me is the Jehovah's Witnesses got me to read the Bible, right? Like God sent the Jehovah's Witnesses to my house, and we did our little walk through the Awake magazine or whatever it was called and whatever. And of course, they'd say they'll go back to the scriptures, which are always out of context. But by doing that, I would actually go and read the story, like in totality, right? I'd actually go and read what it was saying. And that's what got me to read the Bible. And once I started reading the Bible, I kicked them out. I didn't need them anymore. I realized that, they're not really. So God can use anything. He's big. He's not threat. He could use Islam. He could use Mormonism. He could use whatever he wants. He's not threatened by any of these kind of. I know even a Luciferian that came to Christ through Luciferianism, right? He's big, and it's really his job to lead us into all truth. And it's okay to not have all the answers. I think that's a safe thing to say. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think this is just a topic that's been coming up a lot that I've had to do in multiple conversations. But talking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. That one?
Yeah.
Usually the more arrogant you are, it's usually because you know as less than everyone else.
The least, yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like how you thought you understood the world and your parents were stupid when you're 16.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You thought you knew everything.
You live in this little bubble going to school and in your parents' house, and you just think you know the whole world. But then, as soon as you leave in that bubble posh and you go, man, I'm a freaking idiot. My parents were right most of the time. Right. It's one of those kind of things where like all the people who are most staunch in their beliefs is probably because they haven't even expressed other beliefs or even listened to other people before in their life. Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so, and just by that nature, usually the more you learn and the more you know, the less you realize right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the pool of knowledge that you're now, experienced to, you realize you have such a small fraction of that, and the available, it's that knowing what you're ignorant of and then what you're ignorant that you're ignorant of, right?
Correct.
You don't even know that you don't know that. Yeah. And so it's all about, expanding your pool and just learning to be humble and that humans are pretty dumb.
Pretty much. Yeah.
If you think you have the answers, then you're just basically that 16-year-old that thinks he's cool in his bed in his mom's house, right?
Yeah. I think that the one take, I mean, we don't have anybody jumping in. Tom, I appreciate you, bro. I know you can't jump in today. That's all right. But yeah, I think, I mean, for you and me, obviously, we've kind of been through the ringer. We've kind of gone through a lot of the stuff, and we're on the other side, kind of looking back. There are a lot of people who are still kind of stuck in it. And like I was telling you about my friend who's trying to correct me right now, like he's trying to preach my message to me, which is hilarious. What ended up happening with him is, he went back to his peer group. So he came to our conference, all fired up, all that good stuff. And then he went back to his church and they fixed him, right? And his need to kind of be part of that peer group was more important than the freedom and like the different perspective that I'd shared with him. And that sometimes is the crux, is that sometimes we choose conformity just for the comfort of it, rather than standing up on what we know to be true. And there's nothing wrong with that. You got to do what's right for you, right? You got to, it's your walk with the Lord. You know, he's going to guide you. You got to make those choices and stuff like that. But my one message would be, if anything you could pull from this is, it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to have doubts. And just because a person has questions or doubts doesn't make them the enemy. In fact, it makes them very human, right? And anybody who, as I say, any God you can't question doesn't deserve your worship, right? In fact, he even puts it forward, like, test me, put it to the test and see, if I'm faithful or not. And that requires to be able to doubt and to kind of be flexible. And the church generally has not been very friendly to that kind of attitude. They try to crush that, dissent and stuff like that. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, right?
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
very tricky. And I think it goes to what we were talking about before, is don't get caught up in the small shit, right?
Yeah.
And so many people, that's their whole thing. And like, Jesus, fulfilled the law, right? And all that stuff. And now we're saved by faith alone. But now that we don't have the law abiding to us, people still really like the law and want to put it back on themselves and others, right?
Correct.
And I think it's just trying to decipher, like, is this person actually looking out for my best interest, or do they feel like enforcing a law?
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, we don't have anything else. Any kind of final thoughts, and we'll wrap it up there.
Oh, I think that one was a good final thought.
That was kind of a good final. Yeah.
You know what I just said.
I agree with everything. And the reason that people put the law back on people is because they don't really believe in the Christ in them. They don't really believe that Christ is in you and he will change your life. They don't really believe it. Yeah, so they try to impose it by law on other people. Yeah.
It's that hard concept of letting go, right?
Correct.
And like just
faith.
Yeah. So this is an addiction term that we talk about, is surrender to the process, right?
Correct.
And that's hard because you don't like giving up control, but the only real way forward is to surrender to the process, right?
Correct.
Figure out what you can't control, which is almost everything. And, just live in it.
Amen.
Such easy words, such hard to do, but.
Correct. The same faith that saves you is the same faith that keeps you. And faith, another word for faith is trust. Trust the process, trust the Christ in you. Anybody ask me anything, I'll give my opinion. And then I say, look, whether you think it's right or wrong, trust the Christ in you.
Yeah.
That's it. He's the one who will finish the work. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I think that is the conclusion to Religion Zero, number 51. Next week, we are going to be on CONK's channel. All right, CONK's channel this way.
Or Harambe's,
Or, yeah.
We'll make a Harambe one.
Peace. Yeah. Guys, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Share it out to anybody who might be interested in this topic. Leave some questions below. We always come back and check on the comments later. And guys, thanks for the donations and everything like that. It goes a long way to help us out. And we will see everybody next week. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Sweet.